Hi there, you're back so that we can talk about what effective writing in the data commentary section of your paper should look like. Remember, the reason why we've got three different headings is there are different things you're supposed to do in each section. There's different kinds of writing called for in each section. And really, this is why this is the last assignment for the class, right? Is because this paper is the most challenging. You have to put together all the skills that you've learned this semester. But I think you can do it, right? So we talked about the introduction section already, and you've also looked at some materials to help you understand what we mean by commenting on data, right? But now I think it's time to look at a student example that I think is pretty good. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you remember when we talked about the introduction section, I used a sample from the social media group. This time I'm going to use a sample paper from the plastic waste group. Okay. Her subtopic had to do with the use of plastic to develop fuel oil, which is an absolutely fascinating subtopic that I was not even familiar with before the student set out on her research. That is a sign of effective research, right? One of the many signs. But let's go ahead and look at this. Remember, you were supposed to go ahead and read this, and then you do the things at the end here that I asked you to do, because these are the things that it says you should do in the assignment directions, right? So let's go ahead and get into that. Where is the journal introduced, right? Well, this is pretty straightforward. So she identifies the journal name, which should be in italics. Again, these are A papers, they're not perfect, right? And then she introduces the title of the article as well as the author's name. Because again, before you delve into delivering the data, you want to let the reader know where this is from. Then they'll see, oh, okay, they're pointing to an academic journal. We can trust this data. That's what your reader's going to think, right? Because all of these academic journals have very strict publishing guidelines. This research has to make its way past quite a few peer reviewers to be sure that it has been done properly and that it is credible. So that's why you introduce the article, right? So the name of the journal and the title of the article, and the names of the people that wrote it. What is next? Where is the study explained, right? The vast majority of academic journal articles do some kind of research, right? They find things out using surveys or other forms of research. Depends on what they're researching, right? Once in a while, you can find one that is somewhat opinionated. They're titled commentaries, and they're much shorter than the other academic journal articles. They're like 2 pages instead of 15. It's fine if you chose one of those. They still have data. Message me in Canvas if you're in that situation and you have questions. But anyway, most of them do they're doing some kind of study, and you should explain to your reader, well, what did they look at in this study, right? And so, again, she is using this is all her own words, right? You can tell she has read this article thoroughly because these articles are dense, they're complex, right? And so sometimes you have to read them multiple times to make sense of them, but you can tell she really understands what this author set out to do. They compared two of these pyrolysis plants, and they wanted to try to find out, the efficacy of reducing plastic by turning it into fuel. So you can see how it's related to that plastic waste topic, right? Trying to figure out what to do with all this doggone plastic waste that we have, right? And so this is where she explains the studies that were done. You see how well organized this is? The results. You see, she's signaling the reader. Here comes the data. That's effective writing, right? And so here she begins to get into, and again, of course, you can never list all the findings from your academic journal article. There's so many. Your job as the researcher here is to delve through this and figure out what's really significant. What are the data points that you feel like you have something interesting to say about that stand out to you as being relevant, right? And of course, the authors, they do some work to analyze these things. They're going to help you figure out what the most relevant data points are. You're not completely out on your own with that, right? But, she summarizes some of the more pertinent findings, right? And you can see where the data is because it's numbers, right? Numbers. Oops, making changes there. Please note there are direct quotes here, but she uses them judiciously. There's a lot of paraphrase. There's a lot of her explaining things in her own words, right? None of this is cut and pasted from the source. This is. That's why it has quotation marks on it, right? That's appropriate use of direct quotes and in-text citation. But when you're really trying to synthesize and explain a complex article like this, you're going to want to use some paraphrase. Here at the end, she sort of winds it up, and that obviously anybody who's working on this topic group, they know that this is significant, right? They're showing that they can turn this plastic into fuel, and 96% of it can be used, right? So she's done a good job of identifying the most significant data. And here is where she begins to comment on it, right? Okay, so we just said, where's the data? The data is all in here. Where does the student comment on the data? This is all comment here, right? So she says it's promising. She explains why it's promising. She explains why this is significant, right? And how this could help solve, to some degree, the problem that we are facing with plastic waste. You can tell, too, that she's reviewed the module materials where it talks about vocabulary to use and how to, create the appropriate kind of comments. Again, you don't see her coming in here and saying, this proves everyone should have waste reduction plants and we need more of these in the US and blah, 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 like beating you over the head with persuasive writing. That is not what academic writing does, right? You look at the data and you think, what can I say about this data based on the strength of it, right? What conclusions can I suggest based on this data, right? And certainly there's some room for you to suggest what you think should be done going forward, but that goes in the path forward section. For now, we want to understand from you, what does this data mean? Why is it significant? What does it suggest, right? And what her data suggests here is that this idea of plants that can repurpose plastic waste and turn it into fuel oil, that this is promising research, and this suggests that it could potentially make a difference in terms of worldwide efforts to reduce plastic waste. So again, comment is basically you explaining, what does this data mean? Why does it matter? What might it suggest? Not you trying to convince me of anything, right? Okay, I think this is, like I said, I think this is a good example. It does everything I've asked for in the directions. If you're in the social media group or the opioid crisis group and you would rather look at those sample papers, those data commentary sections are pretty good as well. So feel free to do that. And if you have questions about how to do this, if you're struggling with figuring out what to do with your academic journal article, you should message me in Canvas or stop by office hours and I can assist.